If the cuckoo won't sing, make it sing.
This famous saying is often used to describe the life philosophy of Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, what comes to mind when you hear that name? He is one of the most extraordinary rags-to-riches figures, not only in Japanese history, but in world history. Born the son of a peasant, he rose to unify all of Japan and become the supreme ruler of the nation. To understand just how incredible this is, imagine someone from a poor farming background becoming the president or prime minister of a country. But what makes it even more astounding is that Hideyoshi achieved this in 16th century Japan, a society defined by rigid class hierarchy. His rise even surpasses stories like that of U.S. President Abraham Lincoln or Epaphroditus, a Roman slave who became a trusted advisor to the emperor. As viewers of our previous video on Oda Nobunaga may recall, in 1582, Nobunaga was betrayed and forced to take his own life at Honnoji Temple. This incident, known as the Honnoji Incident, abruptly ended Nobunaga's efforts toward national unification. But history didn't pause there. After Nobunaga's death, a new figure began to emerge from the chaos of Japan, none other than Toyotomi Hideyoshi. As Nobunaga's successor, he inherited his mentor's dream of unifying Japan, and remarkably, he would be the one to fulfill it. Before we dive into his life, let's briefly explain the Sengoku period for our international viewers. The Sengoku period lasted from around 1467 to 1603, roughly 140 years of continuous conflict and division in Japan. This was a time when the country was fractured into many small territories, each ruled by a feudal lord. It's similar to how Germany and Italy were divided into small states before unification, or how medieval European lords challenged centralized royal power. Back then, Japan wasn't a single unified nation. Instead, powerful local warlords called daimyo controlled their own regions and constantly fought each other for territory. Think of daimyo as the equivalent of European dukes or feudal lords, each with their own armies, castles, and political authority. In this era of chaos, Oda Nobunaga appeared, using innovative policies and military might to expand his influence and bring Japan closer to unification. But when he fell short of his goal, it was Hideyoshi who stepped in to carry the torch. Why is Hideyoshi's rise so significant in history? Because he did more than unify the country. He laid the foundation for a peaceful era that would last over 250 years. Many of the political and social systems he created would be inherited by the Tokugawa shogunate and even influence the Meiji Restoration. In today's video, we will closely follow Hideyoshi's miraculous journey from peasant boy to ruler of Japan. We'll explore how he caught the attention of Oda Nobunaga, how he navigated the turbulent waves of the Sengoku period, and what legacies and mistakes he left behind. Let's begin the story of one of Japan's most fascinating and transformative leaders. In 1537, a boy was born in the village of Nakamura in Owari Province, the area now known as Nagoya in Aichi Prefecture. Modern-day Nagoya is Japan's fourth largest city and home to the headquarters of Toyota, but back then, it was just a modest provincial town. The boy's name was Kinoshita Tokachiro, the man who would later become Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Hideyoshi's beginnings were marked by deep poverty. His father was an Ashiguru, a low-ranking foot soldier, and his mother was the daughter of a peasant farmer. Ashiguru were positioned at the bottom of the warrior class, similar to enlisted infantry soldiers in modern armies. In European terms, they were comparable to mercenaries or medieval foot soldiers. In other words, Hideyoshi was born far below the social status of a samurai. As a child, he worked a variety of odd jobs to help support his family, selling needles, carrying sandals, assisting carpenters. These jobs were akin to part-time labor, similar to how children in poor households might deliver newspapers or wash dishes in modern societies. And yet, it was through these humble beginnings that Hideyoshi's resilience and character were forged. His life took a dramatic turn in his late teens. When he entered the service of Oda Nobunaga, he began at the very bottom, performing menial tasks such as warming Nobunaga's sandals in his chest to keep them warm on cold winter days. This small gesture became a famous anecdote, symbolizing his dedication and attentiveness. Imagine a personal driver preheating a CEO's car on a freezing morning, the kind of initiative. Around this time, he was given the nickname Saru, meaning monkey, due to his appearance. Though the name might seem insulting today, it was actually a term of endearment used by Nobunaga, who rarely showed such familiarity. In fact, Nobunaga was known for being strict with his retainers, but Hideyoshi was one of the few who earned his affection and trust. This is similar to how a modern boss might fondly nickname a particularly loyal and capable employee. What lay behind Hideyoshi's meteoric rise? The key was his extraordinary talent, especially in three areas. First was his unwavering loyalty. Hideyoshi served Nobunaga with absolute devotion, completing even the most difficult assignments without fail. This devotion mirrors that of Roman legionaries who pledged loyalty to Caesar, or Guan Yu's loyalty to Liu Bei in China's Three Kingdoms. Second was his intelligence. Despite having no formal education, Hideyoshi possessed sharp practical wisdom. He had an innate understanding of human nature and was quick to grasp what others wanted or needed. In today's terms, he had high emotional intelligence and excellent communication skills. Third was his rare talent for winning people over, a charisma that allowed him to turn enemies into allies. He understood others' perspectives and could offer them the right incentives at the right time. This ability is akin to the skills of diplomats or political strategists, or the persuasive powers of ancient Chinese tacticians like Su Qian and Zhang Yi. Nobunaga allowed Hideyoshi to rise not because of his background, but because of his talent. In a society where social mobility was almost impossible, this was revolutionary. Nobunaga was a meritocrat. He valued ability over lineage. This attitude was similar to how Silicon Valley companies today might prioritize talent over academic credentials. For Nobunaga, Hideyoshi was the embodiment of a new era, one where ability could transcend birthright. Thus, Kinoshita Tokichiro, the boy born to a poor family, steadily earned Nobunaga's trust. And while the path to becoming a national ruler was still long and uncertain, the qualities he developed during this early period, loyalty, intelligence, and charisma, would one day carry him all the way to the top. On June 21, 1582, the historic Onoji incident occurred. At that time, Hideyoshi was leading a military campaign at Bichu Takamatsu Castle, located in what is now Okayama Prefecture, about 200 kilometers west of Kyoto. To put that in perspective, it's similar to the distance from London to York or from Paris to Brussels. Upon receiving the shocking news of Oda Nobunaga's death, Hideyoshi immediately negotiated a truce with the enemy and began a rapid march back to Kyoto. This bold maneuver is famously known as the Great Return from the Chugaku region, and is considered one of the most legendary forced marches in Japanese history. Hideyoshi led an army of about 30,000 soldiers, covering 200 kilometers in just 10 days, an almost unimaginable feat at the time. It would be like marching on foot from Paris to Brussels in 10 days, a truly extraordinary display of speed and determination. This rapid response gave Hideyoshi a strategic advantage. On July 2, 1582, he confronted Akechi Mitsuhide, Nobunaga's betrayer, at the Battle of Yamazaki, located between Kyoto and Osaka. Hideyoshi's forces defeated Mitsuhide, who fled and was later killed. With this victory, Hideyoshi quickly gained national fame as the man who avenged Nobunaga's death and positioned himself as a leading figure in the power struggle that followed. But the struggle for Nobunaga's succession was far from over. A fierce power struggle erupted among his top retainers, especially between Hideyoshi and Shibata Katsui, one of Nobunaga's oldest and most experienced generals. This situation is comparable to a corporate succession battle, where a veteran executive and a rising star compete for leadership after the company founder dies. In 1583, the two clashed at the Battle of Shizugadake, located near the northern end of Lake Biwa in present-day Shiga Prefecture. Lake Biwa, Japan's largest freshwater lake, had long been a strategic location in military history. Hideyoshi emerged victorious in this battle, defeating Katsui and effectively securing his position as Nobunaga's successor. This triumph was comparable in impact to Napoleon's victory at Austerlitz, where he solidified his dominance over Europe. After Shizugadake, Hideyoshi continued expanding his power. In 1584, he faced off against Tokugawa Ieyasu, the powerful daimyo ruling the Tokei region, in the Battle of Komaki and Nagakote. Although neither side claimed a decisive military victory, Hideyoshi chose to resolve the conflict diplomatically. Eventually, he succeeded in bringing Ieyasu over to his side through negotiation, a masterstroke of political skill. This was a clear demonstration of Hideyoshi's ability to use diplomacy as effectively as military force. It's similar to how modern nations build alliances not just through military pressure, but also through economic and political deals. Then came 1590, and Hideyoshi launched his final major campaign, the Siege of Odawara. Odawara, in modern-day Kanagawa Prefecture, had long been the stronghold of the Hojo clan, one of the last major powers resisting unification. Hideyoshi led an enormous army of roughly 200,000 soldiers to surround Odawara Castle. The sheer scale of this army rivaled some of the largest military operations in world history, comparable to Roman sieges of Carthage or Alexander the Great's campaigns against the Persian Empire. After a prolonged siege, the Hojo clan surrendered. With this victory, Hideyoshi achieved what had long eluded Japan's warlords: the unification of the entire country. A man who had been born a peasant had now become the undisputed ruler of Japan. But Hideyoshi's brilliance didn't end with military conquest. He also proved to be a gifted administrator. One of his most impactful policies was the Taiko Land Survey. Taiko Kenshi. Taiko was the honorary title given to a retired regent, and Hideyoshi used this role to launch a nationwide land survey. This policy established standardized measurements for farmland and taxation, a system akin to modern land registries or national censuses. It laid the foundation for a stable and centralized fiscal system. Another major policy was the sword hunt katanagari. This law prohibited peasants from owning weapons and clearly separated the roles of farmers and warriors. The goal was to prevent uprisings and maintain order, a policy similar to modern gun control measures. Together, these reforms aimed not just at conquering Japan, but at governing it effectively. Hideyoshi wasn't just a warrior, he was a visionary leader who understood that law and order were as essential as military strength. After unifying Japan, Toyotomi Hideyoshi's ambitions did not stop there. In 1592, he launched a massive military campaign across the sea, the invasions of the Korean peninsula. This series of campaigns is known as the Bunroku and Kicho campaigns, named after the era titles used in Japan at the time. These Nengo, or era names, are similar to how the West uses B, C, and A, D, to mark historical periods. Hideyoshi's true aim was not just to invade Korea, he intended to conquer Ming China, the dominant empire in East Asia at the time. The Ming dynasty ruled from 1368 to 1644 and had a population of over 100 million. Japan, by contrast, had only about 12 million people. To put this in modern perspective, it was like a small nation trying to conquer a superpower 10 times its size by going through another country. Several factors motivated this decision. First, the unification of Japan left many samurai without a cause. With no battles left to fight, these warriors became restless, a dangerous situation for social stability. This was similar to how modern post-war economies struggle to reintegrate soldiers after major conflicts. Second, Hideyoshi may have felt insecure about his humble background. Unlike emperors or royal families of neighboring nations, he lacked noble lineage. Like a self-made entrepreneur trying to prove himself to established elites, Hideyoshi may have seen conquest as a path to legitimacy. In 1592, Hideyoshi launched the first campaign with an army of approximately 160,000 soldiers, one of the largest overseas deployments of its time. This was comparable in scale to the Allied D-Day landings during World War II. Initially, the Japanese advanced rapidly. However, fierce resistance from Korean militias and reinforcements from Ming China brought the campaign to a standstill. A turning point came with Admiral Yi Sun-sin of Korea, who led the Korean Navy. He deployed ironclad warships called turtle ships Jeobuksun, which severely disrupted Japanese supply lines at sea. These vessels are considered the world's first armored warships, predating Western ironclads by centuries. Yi's brilliant naval tactics significantly weakened Japan's ability to maintain the campaign. In 1597, Hideyoshi launched a second invasion, but by this point, the war effort was exhausted. Korean resistance remained strong, the Chinese army was better prepared, and the Japanese forces were stretched thin. It mirrored the situation of the U.S. during the Vietnam War, superior in firepower but worn down by prolonged resistance and logistics. Back in Japan, the prolonged conflict strained the national economy. Food, weapons, and funds were overextended. The people grew weary of war. Meanwhile, Hideyoshi, once known for his charisma, became increasingly paranoid and erratic. He fixated on protecting his young son, Hideyori, and began to distrust even his closest allies. His leadership style turned authoritarian, much like other historical figures who became isolated in power, such as Rome's Caligula or modern dictators who lost touch with reality. Outwardly, the Toyotomi government still appeared powerful, but beneath the surface, it was rotting. In its final years, Hideyoshi's rule became marked by suspicion, isolation, and policy missteps, foreshadowing the inevitable collapse of the regime he had built from nothing. On September 18, 1598, Toyotomi Hideyoshi passed away at Fushimi Castle, located in the southern part of Kyoto. He was 63 years old at the time of his death. Fushimi Castle had served as Hideyoshi's residence and the administrative heart of his government during his later years. His death occurred while the invasion of Korea was still ongoing. With the loss of its leader, the Japanese army was thrown into confusion and began a full withdrawal from the Korean peninsula. Thus ended the extraordinary life of a man who rose from peasant roots to become the ruler of Japan. Historians generally agree that Hideyoshi died of illness. The stress of managing the state, the burden of overseas warfare, and his declining health in old age all likely contributed. His final years resembled those of a modern-day CEO collapsing under the weight of non-stop pressure. Until his last breath, Hideyoshi worried about the future of his young son, Toyotomi Hideyori, who was only 5 years old at the time. Imagine a corporate founder passing away and leaving a multi-billion-dollar enterprise to a toddler. That's how vulnerable the Toyotomi regime had become. Hideyoshi left instructions to his trusted generals, urging them to protect Hideyori, but these very circumstances planted the seeds of future conflict. The greatest weakness of the Toyotomi government was its dependence on Hideyoshi himself. Unlike long-standing noble families, the Toyotomi clan lacked traditional legitimacy. It was a new power structure built entirely on Hideyoshi's personal charisma and authority. In business terms, it was like a startup company entirely reliant on its visionary founder. Once the founder is gone, the organization loses its central force and begins to unravel. One of the key figures who capitalized on this vacuum was Tokugawa Ieyasu, a powerful daimyo who ruled the eastern Kanto region and had long played a cautious but strategic role in politics. Ieyasu was a seasoned veteran who had survived the eras of both Nobunaga and Hideyoshi. Meanwhile, young Hideyori was too immature to govern. Real political power had to be exercised by regents and senior retainers. This situation was similar to ancient Rome, where child emperors were often manipulated by ambitious senators and generals. After Hideyoshi's death, internal conflict erupted within the Toyotomi camp. Two major factions emerged. On one side, Ishida Mitsunari, a bureaucrat deeply trusted by Hideyoshi. On the other, Kato Kiyomasa and Fukushima Masanori, military commanders who had proven themselves in battle. Ishida represented the administrative side of the regime like a senior official from the Ministry of Finance. Kato and Fukushima, meanwhile, were battle-hardened field generals equivalent to high-ranking military commanders or operational executives. This split between policy and force would ultimately lead to war. In the year 1600, These tensions exploded into open conflict at the Battle of Sekigahara. Sekigahara, located in present-day Gifu Prefecture, was a strategic crossroads in central Japan. The battle was fought between Ishida's Western Army and Tokugawa Ieyasu's Eastern Army. In just 6 hours, Ieyasu secured a decisive victory. The speed of the Tokugawa victory was even faster than Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo. This victory gave Ieyasu de facto control over Japan. In 1603, he was appointed shogun, establishing the Tokugawa shogunate, a regime that would last for over 260 years. But the Toyotomi clan did not disappear immediately. Hideyori continued to live in Osaka Castle, one of the strongest fortresses in Japan, originally built by Hideyoshi himself. Although Hideyori formally submitted to Ieyasu, his very existence remained a threat to Tokugawa authority. It was a situation reminiscent of post-revolutionary France, where members of the former royal family remained in exile, waiting for their chance to reclaim power. Tension simmered beneath a thin veneer of peace. Toyotomi Hideyoshi had indeed achieved his dream of unifying Japan, but he had failed to build a system capable of sustaining that unity. That task would fall to his former subordinate, Tokugawa Ieyasu. The Toyotomi regime, for all its brilliance, was a one-man government, and like many revolutions throughout history, it struggled not with change, but with stability. Now that we've explored the extraordinary life of Toyotomi Hideyoshi, how would you evaluate him? Was he a brilliant success story, or a tyrannical ruler who overreached? From one perspective, Hideyoshi was undeniably a success. He was born the son of a peasant, yet rose to become the ruler of a unified Japan. This would be more than just a rags-to-riches story. It was a miracle, especially in the rigid social hierarchy of 16th century Japan. It's arguably a more dramatic rise than that of Lincoln in the United States or any Western leader of humble origins. But Hideyoshi was more than a military leader. He was a reformer. Through policies like the Taikoland Survey and the Sword Hunt, he laid the foundation for Japan's social stability and modernization. His personal charisma was another defining feature. Hideyoshi had a remarkable ability to win people over, even turning enemies into allies. This trait is shared by some of history's most charismatic leaders, such as Franklin D. Roosevelt or Winston Churchill. People were drawn to his energy, vision, and warmth, at least in his early years. Hideyoshi's Taikoland Survey was Japan's first nationwide census of land and agricultural productivity. It created a standard for taxation and resource allocation that would shape the country for centuries. His sword hunt policy, which prohibited farmers from owning weapons, was instrumental in ending civil unrest and defining the strict social order of the Edo period. These reforms became the backbone of Tokugawa Japan, lasting well into the 19th century. However, we cannot ignore the darker aspects of Hideyoshi's rule. His invasions of Korea resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands and devastated Korea, Japan, and parts of China. In his final years, paranoia and distrust consumed him. He forced his nephew, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, to commit suicide, a tragic act of political cruelty. In this way, Hideyoshi mirrors figures like Nero of Rome or other rulers who were corrupted by absolute power. Toyotomi Hideyoshi was a deeply complex figure, a man of both brilliance and brutality, inspiration and instability. He represents the duality seen in many great historical figures, visionaries who reshape the world but are ultimately undone by their own flaws. Throughout world history, many leaders have followed similar paths. Napoleon Bonaparte, who rose from artillery officer to emperor of France. Liu Bang, who went from peasant to founder of China's Han Dynasty. Abraham Lincoln, born in a log cabin, rose to lead the U.S. through civil war. Hatshepsut, queen-turned-pharaoh of ancient Egypt. Does your country have someone like Hideyoshi, a person who overcame class barriers to lead a nation? History teaches us that regimes built on personal charisma often struggle with succession. Hideyoshi's rule lacked the institutional foundation to survive beyond his own life. Just like modern startups that depend too heavily on the founder, his government lost its drive when he was gone. This is a lesson for leaders even today, in politics, in business, in society. From Hideyoshi's life, we can draw several powerful lessons. That talent and effort can overcome humble origins. That power must be handled carefully, lest it consume the one who wields it. That building lasting systems is as important as achieving greatness. Which part of Hideyoshi's life inspired you the most? What mistakes do you think we should learn from? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. In our next video, we'll explore the life of Tokugawa Ieyasu, the man who destroyed the Toyotomi regime and built a peaceful era that lasted over 260 years. Ieyasu's story is one of patience, strategy, and long-term vision, a striking contrast to Hideyoshi's rapid rise and fall. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. If there are other historical figures you'd like us to cover, let us know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again in the next video. Goodbye for now.